That evolved into becoming a diplomat, which is the core of trying to help people understand each other. And then it morphed into e-commerce. And as you said, marketing is really to engage with people in a way that they will understand, and not just help them understand, but you want them to understand and go to where you want them to go.
What did you want to be when you grew up? Did you know it was something international, or what did you want to be?
What I really wanted to do was help people understand each other's perspectives. I'd say that's the through line in everything I do in my life is how do you get people to understand somebody who's had a very different life, very different trajectory? How do you have them come together and work together?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Digital Revolution Podcast. I'm your host, Eli Adams. Today's episode is brought to you by FireUsMarketing.com, where SEO solutions pave the way to digital excellence. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode where we are joined by Joshua Halpern, the Dynamic General Manager of North America at Shopline.com and founder and chairman of the Getting to Global initiative. At Shopline, Asia's leading e-commerce and point-of-sale platform, Joshua spearheads the expansion across North America, partnering with digital agencies and tech partners. He also chairs the Getting to Global Grow Big initiative, a significant partnership involving the U.S. Department of Commerce and Small Business Administration. This initiative, supported by top service providers, aids SMEs in expanding their sales globally. Joshua is an expert consultant on global digital trade strategies, assisting C-suite executives across various industries from beauty to agriculture. He specializes in direct-to-consumer strategies, supply chain operations, and establishing international business relationships. Previously, as a U.S. commercial service officer in China, Joshua collaborated with leading brands like Estee Lauder and Harley-Davidson. He also initiated the Ecommerce Initiative Lab for the U.S. Department of Commerce. In his leisure time, Josh transforms into the Vambassador, interviewing founders about their global business journey. An alumni of New York University and INSEAD with an EMBA from Tsinghua University, Joshua is multilingual, speaking English, Spanish, and Chinese. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Thanks for having me, Eli. I almost fell asleep listening to myself. Oh,
Well, there's quite a lot of accomplishments on there that I'm excited to dig into the details a little bit in the show today. So your expertise, just like from a nutshell, is all international digital, right?
yeah, that's pretty much probably my core expertise, if you will, at this point.
It's a pretty amazing resume, if you ask me. Just looking through your LinkedIn and then reading through your bio, pretty impressive, man. Good job.
Thanks. You can write a note to my mom if you can. You send me an email.
I will. Yeah. Hey, your son is amazing.
Thanks.
So let's dive in and figure out how you actually got to be such an amazing guy. Let's start from childhood. So where did you grow up? What was growing up like?
Oh my gosh, growing up was like I'm from the hard streets of Long Island, New York. So that was, I guess where I really started thinking. Actually, my mom sent me my mom a lot more than I usually do in the first minute and a half. My mom was very adamant I should learn all about the world. She sent me overseas and did different exploration programs and really got the bug for international. So every time I had an opportunity to travel, I would, and that led up to ultimately going over and living in Spain after college for about 4 years and did a lot of things in between.
So as a young boy, you actually traveled the world quite a bit then.
Yeah, I mean, I looked for opportunities. I taught in a boarding school in England for a couple summers during college, trying to just stay overseas. I got certified in TEFL so that I could travel around teaching English, and then started my first company in Spain right out of college, teaching language through the arts. I went to college for acting. I went to Tisch. I have a BFA in acting, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Part of my youth was how do I get more attention? I guess I went into that as a profession, and I moved over to Spain and ultimately started a company bringing students together and using theater, music, juggling, acting to help them learn languages and culture. So
that's amazing.
Got my bug.
So before college and before you started traveling a lot of that, what did you want to be when you grew up? Like when you were a kid in high school or junior high, did you know it was something international, or what did you want to be?
It's a great question. I knew I wanted to travel. I knew I wanted to be involved in multiple kind of opportunities for understanding different people. And then, I think I never thought I'd be a diplomat. That by all means was not
Hmm.
part of my kind of focus. I think that when I wanted to be an actor, obviously, early age. And what I really wanted to do was help people understand each other's perspectives. And I'd say that's the through line in everything I do in my life is how do you get people to understand somebody who's had a very different life, very different trajectory in a very different socioeconomic bracket? How do you have them come together and work together? And so I think one of the things that I did early on, when I came back after the 4 year stint in Spain,
Hmm.
I worked in nonprofit education work, and I did gang violence prevention, helping gang leaders, police, and school principals, and their gang leader moms all get in a room, and we did a lot of fun, weird activities together, blindfolded, walking on, obstacle courses, and just giving them the experience that is human, regardless of where you're from, and
Yeah.
really stripping away all the layers that we build over time in our lives and say, look, at the core, when you're blindfolded and you're walking through a room and you don't know if you're going to step on a nail or a sneaker, you have kind of the same needs at that point. And then
Hmm.
let's take it from there and now talk about what the layers are that guide us.
So I love that. So in marketing, there's a lot of psychology involved, and I think acting has a lot of that in it too. So you took a lot of these people with different backgrounds or struggling backgrounds, and you first of all leveled the playing field and helped them feel human. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a better way to say it than I did. Yes. Um, yeah. If I may, I mean, I think that
Yeah.
one of the through lines, and I only understand this in retrospect, and that's one thing that, most of us probably, if you're following what you believe in, you may feel like at least I felt like I'm all over the place and there
Mhm.
isn't really a consistent through line, especially when you're an entrepreneur and then you dabbled in and out of corporate to entrepreneurism to other things. It's only in retrospect that you start to maybe see that common thread. And I say the common thread is that idea of transfer of knowledge. So I
Mhm.
started out as an actor, fully embodying and kind of portraying certain perspectives or certain lifestyles to help people understand things. Then I became a teacher, kind of educator through my own company, uh, understanding culture. And then I kind of went into a training in I did a USAID funded project for many years, or for a while, I guess, in Central America,
Mhm.
helping leaders come up to the US and study in community colleges and forestry and HIV prevention, et cetera. A lot of it was how do they understand each other more than anything. And then that came, full circle back to the acting. I started the Beijing Improv Theater Troupe in China, which was not intended to be a democratization through improv program, but I think the Chinese government did feel like it was. We can talk about that another day. But that
Okay.
was also understanding migrant workers within China and their foremen who couldn't speak directly about issues, but through a proxy discussion around skits and theater, you could understand that. And then, that evolved into becoming a diplomat, which is, I guess, uh, the core of trying to help people understand each other. And then it morphed into e-commerce. And as you said,
Yeah.
with marketing to resonate is really to engage with people in a way that they will understand and feel similar to. I mean, there's a little bit more manipulation, perhaps, because you're trying to not just help them understand, but you want them to understand and go to where you want them to go.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of emotion involved, right? And every decision made is made first by emotion and then backed up with logic. And so in marketing and in acting, and it seems like your career has been very service oriented, which I applaud you for that. Like you've always, it seems, tried to add a lot of value and help other people first. Which in marketing, if you do that, I don't look at it as really manipulation. If you're really giving the most value to the person. If you're selling a product and it's the best product that you could ever imagine, and it's the product that you want all of your friends and family to have, and they would be worse off without it, that's true sales. And that's real love, putting that person in front of your needs of needing a paycheck to make the sale. And I feel like a lot of your experience has put you in that position to add a lot of value internationally, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. I mean, at the end of the day, there's so much noise out there that if you are not actually helping people in some way, people have enough other places to go and other places to be.
Yeah.
So it does start with helping people, and I sometimes, to a fault, will have conversations with people just because I enjoy. I do a lot of video work, and I have people book calls with me all the time, and I have no idea where they're coming from and what country.
Hmm.
And I don't know, there's really no benefit to me other than the joy that one gets, which is a benefit and a gift. I can do that, but I do enjoy that conversation and helping people understand things that they didn't previously know.
Yeah,
Hope, hopefully, the whole world could do that, and then we'd be in a better position.
we for sure would. Let's talk about language. So did you try to learn languages early on in high school, or was it like the first time when you moved to Spain, that's how you learned Spanish? Or walk me
Yeah,
through that.
this is an inspirational story for everyone failing language programs and
Yes.
hating it. My worst course was actually Spanish, and I was taught. No offense to Miss O'Whitaker, but I was taught by people, none of whom were native. I just still don't
Hmm.
understand why we don't have native speakers with all the people, especially in Spanish, that live in this country.
Hmm.
But I hated it, and I was lucky to not fail it, and then I would never want to do it again. And at the time, why would I care about Spanish? I knew nobody who spoke Spanish growing up,
Hmm.
and I didn't see an actual value in it. So I ended up at the end of my program at NYU. I ended up getting I had 8 credits left, and I was able to graduate early. So I took my 8 credits, went to the summer program in NYU in Madrid, and had a horrible host family, and I moved to another house family with 10 brothers and sisters. And I ended up falling in love with the host family's daughter, one of the many host family daughters, but it was mostly 7 brothers, which did not like me.
Yeah.
And I ended up being there and then moving back to do acting with my agent and all that stuff, and decided, oh, I must move back to Spain. How can I act like I'm in love and if I don't follow my passion? Which in retrospect was probably one of my biggest regrets. But I moved back to Spain, spent 4 years there, fighting in every corner and every nook and cranny of Madrid with my now obviously ex-girlfriend, and I learned
Hmm.
Spanish. So I can argue about the different cultures and issues and things in Spanish pretty well based on.
But you were there for 4 years the second time, right?
Yeah, it's 4 years. Actually, 4 years the first time. Oh, right, right. Yeah, 4 years the second time. 3 weeks
Okay.
the first time. 3.5. Well, 2 months, but it was
Yeah.
ultimately a 3-week program, and then went back for 4 years. Then I moved back to the States and sold my company, and then when I was back in the States, I ended up working in education development and working every month. I was spend about a week in Central America,
Hmm.
and then I built that gang violence prevention program, and I it was all in Spanish. And we hired 7 social workers, trained them all in Spanish, and they would call me El Cura, which is priest, because all the priests in Central America speak with a Spanish accent at the time, I guess.
Hmm.
And I had a weird accent. That was it.
Was the accent because you were from Spain and a lot of the people here weren't?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the Spanish accent was associated with being a priest,
Yeah.
and then I ended up leaving that behind once I got ridiculed by enough kids, and now I have this weird mixture. And then for Chinese, maybe there's a pattern here we should explore.
Yeah.
My wife had not at the time, my girlfriend, who's now my wife, had joined the foreign service, and we said, "Oh, let's see where we go." And I got sent to China, so I was like, "Okay, I'll go to China and leave everything behind," because I wanted to follow her, and that's when my Chinese started. And then when I joined the foreign service, they sent me back, actually to Taiwan to do very intense training on Chinese language, and that's where that picked it up. I just got in before my brain started to atrophy, and now
Yeah.
I'm I'm still struggling to maintain the Chinese after 5 years not speaking. So,
How long did it take you to pick up Chinese?
as anybody who really speaks Chinese will say, you never fully pick it up unless you're born with it. So I would say
Yeah.
I still don't. I can operate. There was a time where I could operate and work in Chinese, and I could read about 30% of a newspaper.
Oh, wow.
I can't read anything anymore. It's
Yeah.
like the first thing to go if you don't use it. And then my staff, when I was at the embassy in Beijing, all spoke English. So I would try to get them to speak Chinese, but you need a lot of patience to wade through that. So
Hmm.
I socially speak it, but I would say it took me it took me probably 2 or 3 years to really get to the point where I could speak. And I speak a lot. So my
Hmm.
wife, who had done more training than I did, and a lot of other people certainly didn't practice as often. And the Beijing improv troupe got me speaking, and then um, you know, I would go out on my own a lot, and that was the key.
Yeah, that's so cool. I lived in Peru for 2 years, and the total immersion is for sure helps. And then not
Yeah.
speaking it for 20 years. I still speak it. My mother-in-law is from Mexico, but she speaks fluent English. And so when my grandmother-in-law is in town, we speak Spanish. But other than that, I don't speak a lot. But I remember being fully immersed in it for those 2 years and really loving it. And I've been thinking about picking up another language, and it's either Mandarin or Russian. And both of them to me they're completely different than the love languages with a regular alphabet that I'm used to. And so it's a
Yeah.
it's a difficult
I,
decision to make.
look, I'd say that's what's so great about learning, Russian or any sort of character based, image based language. Learning it as a young kid helps you with so many other things. It helps you with
Yeah.
math because it helps you with memorizing. It helps you with so many. That's one of the reasons when people say, I don't know who, but people say that, the Chinese and generally Chinese speakers have a much better facility to math and to do things that we would ultimately, some people will equate to
Yeah.
intelligence. And I would argue it's training and it's expanding your brain. And I
Mm-hmm.
would love, my son, I've had him in Chinese immersion programs for a while. He still, struggles. If you don't have somebody drilling and forcing those characters in your brain, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Which, if I may say, what you said about, motivation, I think when you have a mother-in-law who speaks Spanish, if she doesn't speak English, you'd be motivated. When
Yeah.
I had a girlfriend and I really wanted to be intimate with her, I'll do anything for that to happen. And to 4 years and still really never happened. And I was motivated. That was
Yeah.
what got me to learn Spanish.
Yeah.
And in business, when I was at the embassy, I say, motivation, when, the way I justified to a lot of the work that I've done, when I'm really just passionate about, as you said, as we talked about understanding other people, is what will get them to understand it. Okay, so in the case of a CEO coming to China, they motivated to sell their product or sign some sort of JV.
Yeah.
That motivation will get them to, I can bring them to all sorts of different alleyways, have them eating all sorts of food, get them to understand and kind of bridge those gaps. They may sign or not sign their project, but they're going to go home having experienced something new.
Yeah.
And that's, you need the motivation, to think people are going to learn anything in isolation or understand anything,
Yeah. For sure.
in our country right now. And I don't want to get into politics, but people who have more space around them are not forced to force themselves to understand perspectives. And that's just, it's just nature.
Yeah, and it's hard to put yourself in a position where things are difficult voluntarily, right? Like speaking of the math from Asian countries to America, I actually just listened to a podcast the other day that talked about that one of the other reasons that they're better at math than we are here is because their teachers allow them to struggle longer for longer periods than our teachers. So we would have, you know, a struggle in understanding a math problem, and almost immediately the teacher or the parent jumps in and says, well, here's why you don't understand it, let me explain it, thinking that we're doing what's best for them, where over in Asia they're like, figure it out. And it took quite a bit longer, and the brain, like you're saying, it has to be exercised like a muscle. And so I can totally see where you're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we're humans. We work based on necessity.
Yeah.
And, I think of that always, and I'm sure we all do today. And we talk about there's that book that my friend's reading, The Coddling of the American Mind. Um, I have not delved into it yet, but the concept is definitely resonant, because so many of us have kids that all we want to do is give them what we didn't have and help them and support them. And it does not make them stronger,
Mm-hmm.
and I have that debate all the time. You need the motivation, and the motivation is based on necessity. So.
Yeah. Tell me about what's exciting that you're working on right now. What gets you up in the morning and just kind of get your blood going?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple of things. Obviously, with Shopline, I'm working on bringing a platform from Asia that's completely unknown to a market where there's a pretty dominant player, Shopify, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of, I think, need for disruption in the market, and there's a lot of need for a new solution out there, perhaps. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and that's what definitely gets me up in the morning. And then ultimately on the side, the ambassador is a big part of what I do, trying to interview brands about what they're doing and just tell their story. My particular focus is a lot of staying local, selling globally.
Mhm.
And I think that's really accelerated in the last really 2 to 3 years post COVID. You're seeing logistics facilities and payment solutions and access to influencers and social commerce. Those things are letting people understand the different spaces quicker and get into other markets. So my passion, what I love to do is bring influencers who are in a certain product category from one country to go on road trips with me with influencers here and
Mhm.
understand each other while also visiting cool brands in a particular sector, whether it's rock climbing or surfing or health and beauty. That's a that would be great.
Yeah.
So
Tell me about one of the maybe the coolest influencers that you've got to travel around with.
sure. I mean, I think I'll tell you one that I was really excited about that I didn't get to do, and then we can talk about ones I did. I was going to bring the first Chinese female surfer.
Mm.
She's based in Hainan to the US to meet with one of the more prominent female surfers who makes surf clothing for women,
Mhm.
neoprene, wetsuits essentially. And we were going to take a road trip through California and meet a bunch of friends of mine in the anti-plastics movements and and do some yoga and kite surfing. And then COVID hit and she also
Mm.
couldn't get her visa. And so we had to cancel that trip and we haven't really gotten back to it. But I have worked a lot with a friend of mine, Per, who's former partner of Tony Hawk and
Mhm.
does a lot of investing in
You were
kind
gonna
of
say Tony Stark. I was pretty
he
excited.
was.
I was like, no way, I want to meet him too.
I still don't believe he's not real. I mean, kind of, he occupies such a space in my brain to realize that he's not
Yeah.
real. But no, but Pear is also an amazing guy. Not
Mhm.
maybe Tony Stark, but he does a lot of investing in companies like Cake, which is an electric
Mm.
motorcycle company. That they have offices in LA. We just did a really cool open mic night there at their warehouse for cool brands going global.
Mhm.
And there's some other interesting brands that we've worked with and um, in kind of CBD material and products, but you're just getting into their warehouse. I mean, I'm a huge fan of and have huge respect for people who actually make a physical good and that
Mhm.
other people part with money. They literally take money out of their wallets and pay for somebody who creates for something that somebody created out
Yeah.
of nothing is just a phenomenon that all just at its core should be absolutely respected. It goes back to everything that as humans, from the beginning of time, one person creates something out of thin air based on nothing more than concepts and inspirations from other things,
Mhm.
and then puts it out there, and somebody else who doesn't know them and has no reason to part with money that they could use for something else decides to do so. That's success. That's just
Yeah.
huge. And I have such a deep respect for that because I've tried to do it and I continue to try to do it, as my wife will attest to.
It's hard. It's hard to find the right thing that'll add enough value or joy to somebody to make it fly off the shelves like some of these companies do.
I made this really cool product, which just speaks to everything that I just talked about, right? It's culture agents. It's an awesome, delivery of a educational book, right? And this guy,
Yeah.
like, I spent 7 years working on this sucker, and my
Wow.
wife will attest to it that I've used up a lot of marital capital in this. Every folder has like perforated edges because it's like a top secret folder, and this cost me fifty
Wow.
dollars cost to make, and I
Yeah.
can't sell it for $50. But to understand it's not just about your ideas, but implementing and understanding cost structures. And those are things that, most people like myself, if they do try it,
Mhm.
they burn through capital and they don't succeed. And so for people who succeed, even minimally in the grand scheme of things, I think that's a massive success.
So when you meet with some of these other companies and help them figure out how to take it from just one country to multiple countries, what sort of like the first, second, and third step? What do you do to say like this product or this service actually would be great in this country, and that country?
Great. So I always say that, I mean, the first thing to do, and it seems simple, and most people don't do it, is when you sit down with your team or your own, and you're looking at your Instagram or TikTok or even your, Facebook, marketing reach,
Hmm.
go beyond the US. Where's the traffic coming from? See if you even have a few people and if you got a couple people who have big followings in a market, That's a great starting point. Now you got to talk about, can you get more of that? So I was
Hmm.
just with a client, one of the largest retailers in the US, a direct to consumer brand. They sell to pretty much every, mm, I think they say 190 countries. So I don't know
Oh,
which
wow.
ones they're missing. I don't know which ones they probably don't sell much to, but
Yeah.
they are a fast fashion brand. We went into Mexico, did a study to see what their opportunity was. It's one of the fastest growing markets for them from a social commerce perspective and from just a social perspective. And we went and we interviewed a tons of different consumers to understand why they were buying from them, why they weren't, who they were buying from elsewhere. And pretty much every one of them said, well, they don't do Google search, they don't do Facebook, they all are on TikTok. They don't even really do Instagram as much. And it's okay. So TikTok was an interesting opportunity, and then we have the company start testing on TikTok,
Hmm.
and putting A/B testing on certain content, and then driving most of their traffic and their ad spend into a TikTok related or social commerce related activities. And then when you hit a critical mass, you can start figuring out how do you bring product in and keep it locally if you want to. How do you deliver? How do you deal with returns? But those things now, I like to say it's now easy to say yes to global
Hmm.
because of the logistics and all the different aspects of it, payments, etc. It's hard to grow to identify and grow your brand unless you have the right network and influencer engagement, which is all about the marketing piece.
Hmm. So you can get there, but if you don't have the market, like operations now is easy to go global. It's the marketing piece and getting some eyes on it is more difficult now.
Yeah, and it's both easier and complicated at the same time for different reasons, right? So today,
Hmm.
it's much easier to do it yourself and go direct to consumer. The problem is, for people, I was just talking to a brand this morning that really wants to go after distributors. That's all they care about because they want someone to they want to take it over for them.
Yeah.
Distributors today are so worried about investing in a brand because they know the brand, if they have a certain level of success, can then go direct to consumer,
Hmm.
that they have a much higher bar in certain ways and say, hey, I want a commitment of 2 to 3 years. I want to understand what's the long term goal, because you're going to cut me out the moment you see critical traction, right?
Yeah.
Certain level of it. So that's been a game changer. At the same time, you are going to be able to cut them out. So when you have the historic
Sure.
distributor, now you can't cut them out. So it's a double edged sword.
Yeah. So if I'm a business owner and I'm looking at this, I'm listening to this podcast, and I've been thinking about going international, but I'm not quite sure how or if I'm ready. What you're recommending is that first use, some of the social tools or paid advertising and look at to see if there is any traffic at the top of that funnel. And if there is, sort of test it, get on social media, push some ads, test it, and if there is some adoption, then start out by, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I understand, start out by shipping from here to there. And then if that works, then you can look at taking all of your merchandise, putting it in a warehouse there and growing from there. Is that sort of the like 1, 2, 3 step, if I'm a business owner, how I would look into going international?
Yes, I mean, I think that's great, and I think I would add some color to it. So
Hmm.
if you want to start selling, once you verify you have traction, you can continue to sell on social commerce. It's not fully there yet, but you can start enabling cross-border payments and fulfillment. You're going to get TikTok fulfillment by TikTok soon. You've got obviously um, ways to fulfill off of Instagram, for example. Even if you want to
Hmm.
sell off of your Instagram, but you want to promote on Instagram, and people click the buy button, but they go to your website, and your website has a cross-border enablement in terms of logistics and currency and taxes, you can have them straight to your checkout. So if you're going to, first of all, if you're going to do Instagram and Facebook, um, you can click them over to your own website. You use a plugin like Zonos, which gives you a full automated checkout counter. If you're on Shopify, sure, you can use their existing global markets, I think, thing now, which is essentially
Hmm.
taking everything that they've seen from other companies and partners and either white labeling them or just stealing it from them. But you have the ability to have your website have multiple currencies based on the IP address of wherever their visitor is coming from. And then you can have fulfillment where you can use anything. If you're going to Latin America and use Sky Postal, if you're going to go, you can do Easy Post has multiple solutions. You have Easy Ship, got, or you can use a merchant of record model, which is Digital River or Global E, and now Shopify starting to encroach in all that space. And that's the idea of saying, hey, once somebody comes to my site, which by the way, you're not going to probably drive a lot of traffic to your site if you're an unknown entity overseas. So spending money to drive people to your own site out of the gate probably isn't the best bang for the buck. But if you've got them on social, get them to click off site. So not within Instagram checkout, but you can have them click over to your website. And at that point, they can buy it through these things I'm talking about, the optimization of your own website, or these companies that have bundled those services up. And what they do is say, okay, when you come and buy a product from me, you're actually buying it from a merchant of record like Digital River or Globally. Then they turn to you and they buy the product locally as a USer, and then they take it from there and they deal with all the duties and taxes. They white label Avalara, for example, or other solutions, and then they take it over for you. And that's very easy. The issue is that you do have to have purchasing off your own site, and that can drive people, that could be a lot of work. What I do like to say is that marketplaces are often a very good option for the first entree into an overseas market. And a lot of people, if you're okay with marketplaces and you're already selling on Amazon, frankly, the easiest way to do it is unlock the Amazon buttons for all your markets. If you're not a big marketplace seller or you don't want to do on Amazon, but you're going to want to either look for marketplaces overseas. So that's a Mercado Libre or Lineo or something like that in Latin America. There's Shopee and Lazada. It depends on where you are in the market. There's so many marketplaces. But honestly, Amazon's a great way to just test your market. And then if you want to pull off Amazon or do a special isolated SKU set for overseas through your website, that's fine. Then there's also solutions where you say, I don't want to be on Amazon, but I do want to use their logistics. I don't mind paying more. So you use Amazon's multi-channel fulfillment solution. Now it's in 5 countries. That's an interesting solution. For the US, the idea is, hey, somebody comes to my website, Instagram, TikTok, Amazon, even Walmart. If you're using an intermediary labeling, you can probably do it because Amazon launched their no logo packaging, so Walmart can't find them. But essentially, you can now fulfill you're putting it all into one warehouse. Now, they've done that now in 5 other markets. So imagine the world where now I say, I want to be in the UK because I want to service the UK and maybe Europe. Put your inventory in one place in Amazon and have them fulfill it for all your orders across all the different points of sale you have. Also very easy. You're going to pay more for it, but your goal in the first year or two is not to make money off of international. Your goal is to test the market and see where the ROI is and then invest and grow.
So I love the approach of the database approach that you're talking about, where test it out in Amazon or test it out on one of these other platforms. Cause I've worked with companies in the past that are just like, we want to be in every country. Let's just take it top to bottom. And they start going, and then you ship all the products. And it's like, a year later, you're like, oh, we actually haven't made up enough money to validate being there. So we're going to have to close it and pull everything out. So if you're a business owner out there listening, please take the approach of data first. So do what Josh is saying, go on Amazon or one of these other platforms, test it, get the information, and then from there, pick and choose which countries you go into and expand from there. So very, very important.
I think when we launched, I did a project with Paris Hilton Skincare, and we launched in different markets around the world, and we were going after distributors, and then we decided to try a D2C model for Germany. And we just put a welcome mat in German on our website. We didn't translate the site, and we just wanted to target a certain demographic that we saw an uptick on social in that market. And so we did that, and we offered free shipping and free returns for a 60-day period. And we tested traction. We had some really nice traction to understand the market and where we should go. The goal, that was marketing expense. That was not, the goal was not to make money. It was part of the marketing and understanding expense. And you got to put it in that bucket, because if you're you're trying to guess, you're trying to understand who's buying your stuff and why and what they're willing to get. You don't want to put friction in there yet. Another thing to say, when you're doing that analysis is, the lifetime value of an overseas or cross-border consumer is much higher than and the loyalty is much higher than a U.S. consumer. Not because of U.S. versus other. The fact that somebody's gone through the vetting process to make sure that you're a legitimate company, you're going to deliver it, they like what you're going to get, your sizes are going to be accurate. All those things are barriers to buying, but when they buy, like everything in your life, when you get past those barriers, they're not leaving. My wife would probably attest to that. It took a long time for her to be convinced that I was the right person. Now she's screwed because she's not going anywhere. She's invested. So, that's the beauty of a cross-border merchant, a consumer rather.
So we've talked a lot about companies with actual products, physical products. Does the same go for services? So me as an agency, if I want to go international, what advice do you have for me to take my business international?
Oh, wow. Obviously it depends a lot on the service. I mean, I can tell you that from a SaaS solution service model, you are going to underestimate how localized product needs to be. That
Hmm.
onboarding process is very different culturally. How much a, a a user, whether if it's a B2B, how much the other business is going to need onboarding solutions and help, how much language has to be infused in there because they're looking at every little imperfection to see if this is a sketchy, weird thing or if it's going to cause me problems later down the road. And
Yeah.
if they see anything, depending on the market, they may run. I would say that's inverse for example, in Asia, I do find that people are used to a little bit more rough around the edges services. And so when they come across something that maybe doesn't seem like the right flow, uh, they're willing to wade through it. They're willing to read documents, dev documents. They're willing to read onboarding documents. We don't read in the US
Yeah.
anymore anything, right? So the
Right.
onboarding process, if you're doing SDR is kind of a funnel. The kind of way to engage in the US is very different than how you would engage overseas. Some people want you to get right to the point. What is the value you're providing for me? Some people like, I don't, do I even like you first to tell before I buy for you? So it's very different.
Yeah. Yeah. So working the last 8 years in some other international markets over in APAC as well as EMEA and stuff, I can attest to different cultures affecting everything, right? So down to the wording to some countries out in I believe it was Japan or Taiwan. I believe we had people who had to download papers, read all of them, sign them, take them in, like completely opposite of what we experience here, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, could you imagine we get people um, they have to send in a scanned copy of their company registration. And we don't even know, like, okay, where's that? And then the social security has a very different meaning than your national ID number. We're not
Yeah,
sharing that so readily.
right.
And I'm sure there's equivalents in different markets. So, it's definitely a challenge. And then there's the reseller models and the distributor models, even for software. I,
Mhm.
s- I have a friend who's in software in a similar version to what I do, but he's bringing a Dutch company over here, and it's a Dutch/UK company, and it's a software, and
Mhm.
the time for adoption is longer for any time you're coming to a new market, but um, find the right staff that you trust, and remember that you trusted them when you hired them, because you forget when they start bringing you bad news, and then you start to question the people on the ground. And I can speak from experience that if you got to hire people on the ground, listen to them.
Yeah, for sure. Where do you see the future going in your space in international business, either bringing people from international, from APAC to here or from here to WAMIA? Where do you see the future going, and how can these business owners who are listening get ahead of the curve so that they're not left behind?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's part of the future that's now, which is TikTok and social commerce, people wanting to really listen to their friends to make purchases. I think that's going to accelerate even further. I think people are tired of the marketing of a company telling you what I should buy. And so I think, and with the world getting smaller and social commerce and social media becoming more prolific and kind of permeating, uh, it's going to be about being where the consumers and their friends are, uh, and that's going to probably. I don't know if Web 3.0 is going to be a thing. I don't know if people are going to be. I was just at the CES show and the NRF show these
Mhm.
last 2 weeks, and you see Meta coming out with multiple goggles, and Apple and the Echo glasses now,
Yeah.
and you're like, I think eventually they're going to get there, and you're going to be able to just click through and see your friends as you're walking around. Um, but I don't know, I don't know if virtual products are going to be any different than they are today. The ability to see your product in your own space, but interlocking product with each other at collabs, I think will be big, because just as you trust your friends to tell you what to buy, if you do break a purchase and that product can sync with or is collaborating with another, I think it's going to do the same in terms of conveying, as we talked about earlier, the idea of conveying knowledge and perspective. If I invest in this product and this product helps me understand this product, that collab is going to be key. So if you can find people and products overseas that are, a lot of companies they're thinking domestically still, and they think domestic first, international second. And I would say it's product alignment first, regardless of geography. And then you figure out, okay, where's the easiest way to penetrate, which will become easier and easier globally. So I think,
Mm-hmm.
so a circuitous answer to this, but what I've just kind of talked through and understood in my own
Mm-hmm.
brain is perhaps that it will be easy and almost seamless to ship things within most of the major markets in the world. The cost will be reduced. What you're going to want to do is find those ambassador collaborations with people who are trusted in those markets. And you should start now, not only with individual consumers, with creators, ambassadors, influencers, but other product companies that you could engage with that have complementary solutions or target a similar ICP, ideal customer profile to
Mm-hmm.
yours in an overseas market. That would be an interesting action item for you to put on your list.
Okay. What about companies who are using AI right now to spit out a bunch of content and legal forms and
AI,
all that?
yeah.
How do other countries right now look at that? I have an idea of how the U.S. looks at it. It's not regulated by the government or anything like that. Are you aware of how that's looked upon in other countries?
I can't say I can't say with any authority that I mean, I can look at um Asia outside of China. I think in general, I mean, frankly, just like us, I think most governments from a regulatory perspective are kind of caught off guard. If you go to the
Mm-hmm.
DC right now, everybody's just like when blockchain was a thing, everyone's like, agency of blah, 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 AI. Just they're throwing the
Yeah.
word out there and saying I'm doing it because somebody on the top is saying you have to think about it. And then the hope is that they'll
Mm-hmm.
figure it out after. Um, I'm
Mm-hmm.
working on an AI project in sustainability for housing and for transportation in the US. And it's very much at the beginning. This is like a little side passion of mine. And I'm helping kind of give some
Mm-hmm.
input on there. And I do think that people are just feeling through what that looks like. But I think in general, I would say Asia's a little bit more in the, well, let's see what happens. Let's just play around with it. And from an
Yeah.
e-commerce perspective, we're infusing it into a lot of parts of the platform we're working on with Shopline. Europe, I feel, is on the other side of the spectrum where they're like, let's control this and figure out what this is. And the US is kind of caught like usual in between. We're like, well, we should regulate it, but we should also be free. And what do we do? And so I think that's kind of where I'd put the very rough hypothesis of where everyone falls on that spectrum.
I think that's fair based on what I've seen. That sounds about right. Yeah.
If it doesn't threaten our society, Asia will come out ahead because they will jump ahead and start using it. But like everything, if it starts to, if all of a sudden Skynet takes over, it probably would, it might start there. I don't know.
It's too late at that point.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of ready for it.
So I asked two questions at the end of every podcast, and I've
Okay.
gotten different questions, and I'm super fascinated by some of the stories and answers that I've heard. So the first question is, if you could go back to your younger self and give yourself some advice, what would that advice be?
Oh man, I've thought about this one. You know, I think I I I was a big fan of try everything once, explore. The more different things you try, the more you know about yourself, about the world, what you like, what you don't like. I think knowing when to cut and pivot is important too. I think there
Mm-hmm.
are certain things. I spent 4 years in Spain, and I think it was wonderful. I learned a lot. I could have done that for 2 years, and I would have gotten 2 years of my life back and a good
Yeah.
time of my life. I was headstrong. I was headstrong in one way. I was weak in other ways where I didn't want to make a change. And I think I should have realized I was no longer learning. I could have left that years earlier. Um, Inversely, and I know this is almost contradictory input, but it's about knowing when to stay and when to, know when to fold and when to walk away. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I, I, tried a lot of different things, and what I would say to somebody now, and again, this is probably not for entrepreneurs. Maybe actually two things for people starting out in an early part of their career: pick a company with a good name, do it for 5 years or at least 2 years, because that becomes part of your own personal brand. And then you can leave it and do whatever you want. I didn't do this. And I think that I still get introduced to people, investors, entrepreneurs, et cetera. So, oh, that's that ex Apple guy. And I'm like, oh, he worked at Apple. Great. I don't know if that
Yeah.
he worked for a year at Apple and he was probably like a junior, whatever. But it's about building your brand like you would with your product.
Yeah.
You get your product into Target and then you pull out a Target because you don't like big boxes, but you say formerly, number one seller in Target. Like, okay. Um, and then I think that understanding that, it takes a while to get expertise in something. And I wasn't patient enough in a lot of things. Um, I felt like I understood generally what things were like. I think that's a problem with everything today is you think so accelerated. I kind of get the idea. Let me try to move on and stuff. And you learn things if you breathe and you ingest. You learn things in deeper layers than we really understand, and to take time with that. And only deeply if you're doing it because you really love it and you don't want to cut it out. But there are certain
Mm-hmm.
parts of your product and certain parts of your business that are dragging you down, and they're based on your passion. And when you've got to understand the difference between a passion that creates a business that functions versus a part of maybe your passion and your love that's dragging it down. And I definitely had that problem with the company I created in Spain. I started way too many things. I loved all of them, and it was a drain in the
Mm-hmm.
business.
Yeah, I think that's a super powerful message to a lot of companies who have products that they built that they're babies, right? Then and if the data shows it's time to go, it's time to drop that, then you should go based on data and not the fact that this is the first business you grew or the first product that you had or have a special story. If the market doesn't want it, it's just wasting time, space, and money, right?
Yeah, it's so much harder to do than to say, I know.
Yeah. Okay, so then the last question is, what books, podcasts, or leaders inspire you these days?
You know, I mean, apropos to our whole conversation, I guess I'm reading Malcolm Gladwell's uh, "Talking to Strangers," I believe is the title.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's very much what I'm talking about is understanding how to decipher and discern kind of somebody's real motivations behind them, and understanding that there's a history and a background that leads people to certain things, and there are things that are at stake for people in their lives that you're not aware of. There's a deeper side behind that. And so that's been very helpful. Um, I'm reading this thing, which I don't love reading, but it's actually really interesting. And my boss had kind of suggested it. I don't know if it's to show up properly here.
Yeah.
Blueprints for
Uh-huh.
SaaS Sales Organizations. It's by, I'm not going to pronounce their name, but it's got like charts that I find really useful. If you're a SaaS business, and this is Joshua, not me, but the guy who recommended it. This shout out to you. But he, how to deal with a sales centric versus customer centric organization, and that's really helpful. Um, and then most of it's just freaking emails, Slack
Hmm.
messages, and WeChat. Does that count?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to jump on the podcast and talk with me today. How can people get in touch with you if they want to?
I'm on LinkedIn, Josh Halpern. I think it's what is it? LinkedIn.com/IN/JS Halpern. And the Van
Yeah.
Ambassador, you can follow me, VANBASSADOR, Van Ambassador, like Ambassador, on YouTube and on
Okay.
social, on Instagram, and eventually on TikTok, but I haven't got around to that one yet. So yeah, man,
Nice.
just great to see everybody. And thanks a lot, Eli. I love chatting with you. So thank you.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, a lot of learning. I think that I might have some follow ups as I take my business international. I'm going to definitely get in touch with you and ask if I'm going in the right direction. And hopefully everybody listening got a lot of value from this. And I appreciate everybody taking the time today and listening, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks so much for listening to the episode today. Listen, I know how valuable an hour of your time can be, and for you to take that busy time out of your day and spend it with us, it really means a lot. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider liking and subscribing on whatever platform you're on. And don't forget to leave a comment. Tell us what you thought about the interview. Ask us questions. Let us know what other digital topics you'd like to hear about in the future. We're here to add value to your life and elevate your digital presence online. If you'd like some help doing that, reach out to me at fireusmarketing.com. See you on the next one.